5 minutes past, thereabouts. Thank you all very much indeed for joining Advertising Matters Views from the Frontline. We were fairly floored last week. We were booked out, and 98% of people attending thought it was useful and worthwhile, and we're very grateful for that. We've more attendees this week, so thank you for that. I think the first thing to say is that really this is about building a sense of community. And unfortunately, I was there in the crash of 2010, so I do know the physical and emotional and the business stresses that go with it. So if I can help you or help your business, please don't hesitate. In order to kind of build a business community, if you have anything to say or to advertise on here, I will absolutely shamelessly, as I'm just about to, read them out. So please, I'll also forward them to John or to Dee or to Siobhan or to Hender from last week or Colm. They're decent people up here, so they're very happy to help. John Holland asked me to mention Adtar. He has 350 digital screens across Spar, Londis, Mace, Super Value, D, Off Trade and the forecourts, all placed within a purchasing action where consumers gather to do their shopping. So I think that's a pretty good way to reach consumers. You just need a HTML file, which Streamabout can do for you if you need to. Mags Nelson also asked me to mention on May the 22nd, F104 are having a Mind Your Noggin Day, which is for Jigsaw, the children's mental health charity. So they're worth a mention. But if you have anything else you want to say, please just let us know, and we're happy to do it. We're also asked, do we do these Zoominars for corporates? Yes, we do. And for COVID training, yes, we do. And private staff broadcasts, yes, we do. Anything Adtech is Admatic. Those of you who were with us last week will know that I was stalking the fab Margaret Nelson, who's the CEO of F104, and also part of that wireless group, Rebecca Brooks Sky, in her Baltimore residence. In fact, I've been kind of stalking her for years, but we have got her for next week, so that's important. And she'll be joined by the exiting Virgin Media Television Managing Director, Mrs. Pat Kiley. Apparently there's a rumor going around, and it's actually quite a serious rumor, in that he's joining the FAI. I can absolutely assure you that he's not. That's not happening. I wouldn't think the GAA either, because that'd be too much. James Connolly was shot in the chair for Pat. But that's next week. I'll send you out an early bird invitation. Please do join in when you can, as early as you can, because that will also probably, hopefully, get a bit bigger. It's appreciated that you're here. Hope it's a benefit. We are recording you, or us, as you can see, not you. So you're all muted. You can hear us, you can see us, and we hope we get some benefit, but you're not being recorded, so you're okay in the PJs. And I will do a poll at the end. And if the results are any good, I will share them. And if they're not, I won't. I'm Stuart Fogarty of Admatic, Adtech, Streamabout, the video agency, and AFAO'Meara. My job here is just simply to basically moderate the discussion, to keep it going. And as you can see, I'm in the advertising jungle in our office here. As somebody kindly said last week, Joe the Exotic, but they were joking, I know they were. We'd start with a kind of a 5-minute round robin just to update on what's going on. And joining us, as in every week, is Siobhan O'Connell, former media and advertising journalist with the Sunday Business Post, which is now the Business Post, as Colm would hopefully, if he comes on, tell us. And of course, one of the founders of Business Plus magazine, Ireland's biggest monthly circulating magazine. And as I always say, if you want to support Irish media, you want to support Irish advertising, just go out and buy a copy. That's the way, really, we can help media owners in this crisis. We have the great John McGee, who is the CEO of Irish Marketing Journal, IMJ, and indeed Adworld, former managing director, I think, of Business and Finance, Fido. He's known as Jack to his two friends, and of course, one of the orchestrators of these Zoominars. IMJ, Adworld, kindly support them. Deirdre D. Waldron, the CEO of TBWA Advertising, joins us too. Quite busy, I would think, with SuperValue and the HSE, and hopefully at some stage, Colm O'Reilly, the relative new CEO of what's now the Business Post. If he can log on. He was formerly with Diageo, formerly with Cullen Capital, and lots of other people. So he's a finance man, possibly the right man in these times to manage all of that. So firstly, Siobhan, if we can find out what is the current state of play and any news, any great government supports, or your ongoing tirade for a Minister for Media?
Well, actually, they're in their 3rd day of government information talk, Stuart, as we're having our webinar. So hopefully someone in there is talking about a Minister for Media. Well, just in Business Plus land, briefly, our May issue is out on the shelves, selling well, thank God. And our digital replica edition, which we launched for the first time last week, is getting good traction. That's good. This Sunday, we will be distributing copies of Business Plus magazine with the Business Post. And that's something we're very happy about as well. We do that on a fairly regular basis. Outside then our little BP world, looking at what's happening in the government supports and stuff, I suppose I would say, I mean, the temporary wage subsidy that the government introduced is great, but hospitality, hairdressers, retail salons, they need a lot more help than what they're getting. And the only giveaway they've had to date from government is a 3-month waiver on commercial rents if their premises is shut. They need a lot more. Now, the representative bodies for retail, for salons, for hairdressers, for restaurants, they've all been out, hotels, knocking on the door of government, pleading for more help. But for the moment, you know, the government is keeping its powder dry on what more help is forthcoming. Minister Heather Humphreys did talk earlier in the week about supports for hospitality in terms of VAT reduction, that type of thing. But she did say nothing could happen on that score until a government's in place because it requires legislation. This week, IBEC, the largest employer body in the country, they said it's going to take a whopping 15 billion to reboot the Irish economy. I mean, that's a staggering amount of money, you know, to curb the effects of what we're all going through. And then, of course, you have the National Small Business Recovery Plan that has been set up by Enda Conneen of the Business Post, with Jared Butler of Grid Finance and John Moran, former Secretary General of the Department of Finance. And they've outlined in a lot of detail between the lot of them what are the targeted supports that businesses, not just in media, but across all the sectors that ultimately impact on media, need to get going again. But as I said, not much forthcoming from Pascal yet.
Okay, it's useful to know that there are supports like that, but
oh, yeah,
at the same time, the difficulty is the drawdown is always the problem.
Yeah, I mean, SBCI are doing a lot of stuff, Microfinance Ireland are doing a lot of stuff, Enterprise Ireland, Board BIA, NSAI, SEAI, they all have great supports out there, and you know, you can get them on our website, you get them on lots of different websites, go onto their own websites, and anyone interested can see a lot of the support, local enterprise awards, the support is there that they can get. Okay,
great, thank you very much indeed. Jack, the advertising business, any update, still flying? Do note, which seemed to pass an awful lot of us, the John Malone Liberty Global 35 billion pound merger, which happened during the week.
Yeah, it was a merger. It had been mooted for a while. Merger between Virgin Media in the UK with Telefónica's assets in the UK, which primarily O2 mobile company. It's a 32 billion sterling deal. I suppose it follows trends in the telecommunication sector over the last couple of years where companies, it's called converging. Convergence is the term that's being used, where they come together, you know, offer broadband, TV, mobile services, fixed line services, and bundle them up to customers. So I suppose it's throwing down the gauntlet to the likes of BT, which is probably the biggest player, but also Sky, which was acquired by Comcast there last year. So it's an interesting development, I mean, because it strengthens Liberty Global, which, as we know, owns Virgin Media here in Ireland. Now, Virgin Media Ireland is not part of this merger deal, but I think by the very fact that it strengthens the balance sheet of Liberty Global, and you know, it's a good move, I think, for John Malone and Liberty Global, and it gets them into the mobile space, particularly in the UK, because it had a deal with I think it was Vodafone in the UK, where they operated an MVNO, so it didn't actually own its own mobile network in the UK. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see if this opens the door for Virgin Media to enter the Irish market at some stage in the future with its own mobile service. Currently, you can get a mobile through Virgin Media here in Ireland, but they're piggybacking basically on the 3 mobile network, and as I said, it's an MVNO deal. So that's something to watch. But you know, the size of the deal, it's not going to close anytime soon, and you know, it could be well into the end of 2021 before it's approved by the competition authorities in the UK. But again, it's one of these things that to watch. I mean, it's, you know, the whole industry here has changed considerably over the last number of years and will continue to change. And, you know, when you look at what, and we'll probably hear from Pat Kiley next week, you look at how Virgin Media television has been transformed over the last 18 months since the rebrand from TV3. It's considerable changes, and you know, it has considerable firepower at its disposal, and it's now firmly embedded within the Virgin Media group, which is a good thing. You know, I think Pat made the point to me there a couple of weeks ago. He'd rather be part of Virgin Media going through the crisis now than be an independent operator. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. But just in terms of advertising, there's an interesting thing that just landed today. It was a report from the World Federation of Advertisers, and it was a survey of I think it was 38 international CMOs across 17 different companies, 17 different sectors, and between them they had a combined spend of $46 billion. So 89% of them have deferred advertising spend. 52% are holding back. Now, obviously, this is an ongoing survey that the WFA are conducting. I think it's on a monthly, or if not every 2 months. But it goes to show, you know, what kind of these big brands like, you know, the P&Gs, the Unilevers, you know, the Heinz, they're all kind of covered off in this. So it's an interesting, I suppose, headline figure that shows what's going on globally. You know, now within that that survey, it also noted that, you know, they're estimating probably around a 30% decline in global ad spend this year. You know, and that obviously has implications for all markets, and, you know, including Ireland. You know, of the hardest hit, TV, obviously, they're reckoning down by about 33%, print by about 37%, radio 25%, and the list goes on. It gets worse. So digital, even, you know, online video down by about, I think the figure was 7%, display advertising, online display down by about 14%. So, you know, obviously no good news there, but I think it was probably to be expected. You know, so that seems to me, you know, that a recovery is probably some way off, you know, probably early next year or mid next year before any sign of return to normality, whatever that means. So that's an interesting one. That only landed today, and it's, you know, I think it'll set lots of people back and thinking about you know, how do they plot their way out of this. One of the other things, I've been talking to a few agencies during the week, and I was certainly over the last fortnight, and some interesting things going on, you know, and some agencies are busier than others, and obviously Dee is going to talk about TBWA Dublin, but I mean, you know, the conversations are being had now with clients about where do they go from here, you know, conversations about, you know, how to plan out of this, plan their way out of this, be mindful of, you know, the restrictions when they're going to be lifted, be mindful of, you know, consumer sentiment and habits that may have formed, be mindful and, you know, respectful of, you know, what has gone on. I mean, it's been a very serious and traumatic period for, you know, for the economy, for many families throughout the country. So, you know, the messaging in all of this has to be very carefully considered and very measured. And nobody wants to be seen as COVID washing. You know, we've had greenwashing before, and we've had woke washing. You know, so the latest is COVID washing, and so, you know, a lot of brands are going to have to be very, very careful about that. You know, and, you know, if they don't have anything meaningful to say, you know, if they can't kind of add anything, well, then maybe they should refrain. But that's the other interesting thing is, you know, so, you know, brands, you know, again, from talking to a few CMOs during the week, you know, they're looking for new opportunities to, you know, service their customers or service consumers but in new ways, whether that's through new channels, through digital, whatever. It's interesting. But also on the digital thing, you know, some of the agencies are now having conversations with clients about digital and things like areas like UX and you know, the whole customer experience. You know, some projects that were probably not due to roll out until 2021 and now being, you know, fast forwarded to 2020.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of that stuff going on in the background, you know.
Just very briefly, I also want to mention, because Aisling White asked me to mention it, the iCads are going ahead as well. A good thing, given the circumstance, to reward or acknowledge creativity, Jack?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we should always celebrate creativity. That's what this industry thrives upon. And I think, you know, the iCads have always done a very good job down through the years in rewarding and showcasing creativity. And that's what we need to show. You know, there's been a lot of good creativity. You know, the Commercial Producers Ireland, I don't know if you saw, produced an ad that went out in RTE there last week. You know, a good example of, you know, how creative, you know, this industry of ours is. And, you know, I think the best way to show the power of advertising and communications is, and show the power of creativity, is through award programs like the iCads.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. Deirdre, Dee, you're busy, I presume, with both HSE and SuperValu. So how is it all going, managing it from your sitting room with the 2 young children, I think?
Yeah, I mean, as you guys said, we have some clients that are busy and some that aren't. So it's trying to manage both. I mean, we are, you know, part of a global network, which at this time is very helpful with that backing. There's, you know, quite a large group of resources we can pull from in terms of creativity, but also help to support the business locally. The Dublin operation is normally based in Rathmines. It's a beautiful Art Deco building that you'll all know there in Blackberry Lane. But as of March 13th, literally overnight, I think that date will be in our minds forever, we all transitioned to working from home. So working from kitchen tables and box rooms or wherever we could find. That was quite traumatic, to be honest. It just happened so quickly and overnight. But I was very proud of the agency, you know, pleasantly surprised that it did work fairly quickly, and we adapted very, very quickly. I think it's safe to say that the agency probably found a new sense of solidarity, so a new sense of team spirit, the common understanding that if we are going to get through this and if we're going to succeed, then we're going to have to do that together. And so despite the upheaval that was going on around us, it was really heartening to see our colleagues and clients band together to create really significant, important campaigns over the last couple of months that I think we'll remember kind of for years to come. So as you said, we've been doing COVID communications for the HSE and SuperValu, but also Centra, Leia Healthcare, Department of Health, Department of Justice, National Transport Authority, National Dairy Council, to name but a few. So lots of brands are responding in this initial COVID response phase. But of course, how we create those campaigns has had to dramatically change. So everything from the strategy and research to ideation, and in particular production, which John touched on there, I guess that's been the most difficult transformation. So, you know, there's many campaign elements that can be created remotely, TV animation, radio can be recorded remotely, but there's lots that can't. And so we've had to really adapt and do that as part of the restrictions. So for example, we did a video call shoot for the domestic violence campaign Still Here for the Department of Justice. That was required, unfortunately, because of the rise in domestic abuse campaigns at home. But we were able to do that via video technology. And as the restrictions get lifted, we will find ways to do different shoots. We're doing a shoot for another client in the director's home. And as we get to July 20th, which is phase 4, we can start to phase these in and into phase 5. And so we're planning shoots already for August. So there is light in this sometimes very dark tunnel. But I guess, as you said, we have been busy responding to COVID campaigns, but a lot of our clients are facing revenue drops. They're facing customer loss, and all of this amid this rapidly changing consumer sentiment that John talked about. What are the new consumer needs? So having gotten through the last kind of 8 weeks, I suppose, of initial response campaigns, we are now turning our focus to what we're calling rebound planning for our clients, and kind of doing that on a case-by-case basis. I think it's fair to say as well that the dramatic change in work habits and the rapid response in campaigns has never been seen before. So I'd like to shout out to the agency and the talent in the agency for really pulling out all the stops over the last few weeks. A huge part of agency is agency culture, and so it's been really important for us to try and get everybody together on video calls. Our social committee has been brilliant getting us all together on non-work related video calls. We had a housebound treasure hunt that all the kids got involved in. So the team spirit has been really important. But I guess the other part of that is we're very lucky to have clients that have stuck with us, that are still advertising. They're making a real impact during these COVID times. So I want to thank them as well for sticking with us and giving us, I guess, a purpose for getting out of bed and going into our kitchens to fight that good advertising fight.
I just want to open the conversation a little bit into the panel and talk more about retail advertising. But do you want to talk about 100 Voices, or that the way brands are going to come out of COVID, or the way retail advertising is changing?
Yeah, I can do both. I mean, let's start maybe with retail advertising. For retailers, their role changed overnight. They previously would have been multiple competitive brands in the eyes of consumers, and then overnight became a provider, a frontline service. So that was very challenging for retailers, but it's also a big opportunity to kind of step up when the country needed them. And as you mentioned, SuperValu and Centra, as part of the Musgraves Group we would work with, have very much a community-based retail service. And so SuperValu would have been one of the first on air with their COVID communications to really reassure customers that the shelves would be stocked, but also to be very empathetic towards their staff, because they now all of a sudden were frontline workers. Yes. And so that first communication was really important. It was reassuring, empathetic. And since then, they have kept the communications in that tone, but also in a useful way. It now is not the time for big brand self-congratulatory kind of communications. It's very much in a more useful focus. So they've done, they promoted the community call campaign, which was a national plan with national government, local government and the GAA to deliver groceries. And of course they did their usual, Mother's Day and Easter and all of that, but yes, in a very empathetic way. The first Mother's Day where many grandmothers and mothers couldn't hug or even see their kids. So everything had to be done in a very empathetic way. And they have their recipes out now, which I constantly are delving into on their website. So useful and empathetic and reassuring has been the case. And actually, just to finish on that, what's really interesting is that the Kantar report came out last week, and SuperValu are back on top again for the first time in a while, back with a very big market share of 22.2%. So this approach has worked pretty well for them over the last 8 weeks.
I know, Dee, one of my great things is that my dad wrote "Better value beats them all" for Dunn Stores. I said I wouldn't say that. Other fathers left you with large houses and antiques, but I was left with the slogan. Just on that Kantar point, Jack, did you want to say a few words? And Siobhan, you've got a view on retail advertising as well?
One thing that struck me about that Kantar research, Stuart, that I found was interesting was what consumers now want from brands in the next phase of their advertising messaging. So, it was coming quite clearly in that Kantar research that brands in the retail space that don't have anything different to say now, and that, if you like, almost are banging on too much about COVID-19, are struggling because customers want to move to the next phase of messaging. They don't want to be reminded constantly of this pandemic in the advertising messaging. Yes.
Jack?
Yeah, it's the whole, I mean, if you look around, and this is obviously going to change over the next couple of weeks, but I mean, the whole country, the retail sector has been turned on its head. But I was over my local, am I allowed to say Tesco, here the other day, and obviously mindful of social distancing and everything, but it was fairly busy, and there was plenty of goods on the shelves. Likewise, I've been to my local SuperValu, which is a little bit further up the road, but there's no shortages of anything, and I think that's been a lot of comfort to people. It's and I think they will benefit. They've been very, I think, respectful of people's needs. They've been very respectful of social distancing. They've really done, I think the retailers have really done a great job over the last 8 to 10 weeks. Now, as the other retailers open up, some of the utility companies, at the mobile phone shops, etc. As they open up now, I think, you'll see, a little bit more, a few more people coming into shopping centres. You'll see, it remains to be seen, smaller outlets, and they may be challenged. But I think, once we get the retail sector open for business again over the next 10 weeks, it's going to be very good.
Absolutely.
And as Siobhan mentioned, things like hairdressers. I mean, there's lots of people, apart from myself, are looking for to go back to beauty parlors, to go back to hairdressers, and these are all SMEs. These are all companies that contribute to every local economy around, or every local economy around the country, in every town and village. And it's important that these businesses reopen, and that's a start.
Well, don't know about you, but I know I look fabulous, and so too does Colm O'Reilly, the CEO of the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday Business Post. Nice to see you, Colm.
And you, Stuart.
No retail advertising, I wouldn't think as such, but firstly, I should say, knockout product on Sunday. Absolutely knockout. Really incredible. How you get a product like that out under circumstances like this is frankly extraordinary. But maybe just very briefly, for 2 or 3 or 5 minutes, just give us an update on how things are going at the Business Post.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. As you can see, I'm in as John McGee, which means he's twice the man I am, I think, which is fair to say. But apologies, I've had some technical issues. It's been a very unusual time for the Business Post. We did a town hall with the team yesterday. We'd 78 people come in over Zoom, which is an odd experience, but it was so wonderful to see everybody's face. See those faces again. Not having seen the staff for 8 weeks, with a team that size, clearly we break it down into various teams: sales, digital, editorial, etc. So it was just great as CEO to be able to see everybody. It's been a really tough time. I think there's no two ways about it. And I think, the focus we put on things over the first couple of weeks was really in the area of execution of the operating model. It was hard we dusted down the business continuity plan towards the end of February to realize that there was no section in it on pandemics and what to do in a pandemic. So we had to write that from scratch. And literally within 48 hours of briefing the whole team, Leo Varadkar tells us on the 12th of March that we all have to go home. So it really was trial and error. But we made a huge decision at the start, which was, as a weekly, our role is to analyze, to provide insight, to provide informed opinion about what's happening during the week, and really be a thinking read. And what we felt was really important was that we maintained that quality standard. We felt that, the other option of reducing pagination, keeping it tight, watching the costs, which look, I'm a former CFO, costs are important. But, we kind of felt that was really important to our readers and to our clients, was that we actually put out the very best product that we could. And that's what we've tried to do over the last 7 to 8 weeks. And look, I'm thrilled with the team. I think they've done a tremendous job in really difficult circumstances. And like every other SME out there, we've had to, put in pay cuts. We've had to do some temporary leave for people. It's been tough, but the guys have been tremendous in how they've responded.
Can I just ask you as well about, because we're going to just talk very briefly, going to talk to John in a second about the digital duopoly. I mean, they're in the news again. The media taxes on the UK has been withheld or held up. Australia is suing them for copyright issues, because the view is, particularly, I know we talk about Facebook and Google, but it's obviously not just Facebook and Google. So do you have a view on that? Are you seeing any impact on that? Or is there a view from the Business Post, Colm?
Yeah, I think, look, we would very much be of the view that that this is a significant threat to the industry. My original background, I've been in the role as CEO of the Business Post for the last 12 months. And prior to that, I was the CEO of Colm Capital, which are the private equity investment firm which bought the Business Post. And I can say, when we were doing the analysis and the due diligence on buying the business, we saw a tremendous opportunity. But the one thing that did give us time and pause for thought was the impact of social media platforms. And what we saw really was an unfair, unlevel playing pitch. And when you're coming up against competitors with the levels of resources that they have and the level of context that they have, and you're right, it is others, it's not just the big two, it's a significant issue. So it's been really interesting to see what's been happening. You look at the ruling in France, whereby the competition authority there, based on what Google, their performance in 2019, whereby 90% of all searches have gone through the Google search engine. They see it as a competition issue. I think from the Business Post perspective, journalism costs money. And, and we can only produce the product that we do, and we can only serve our readers in the way that we do if we're able to, confidently predict how the business is going to operate. And so from that perspective, I think copyright is massively important to us. This is a creative industry. It's an industry that is, about our readers, but it has to be protected. And so look, certainly through our role as the Business Post and through News Brands, our industry representative lobby group, we think that it's hugely important that this is on the agenda, both from an Irish government perspective and at EU level. Okay.
And presumably, I don't know the answer, but presumably you're seeing a surge in your digital product.
Yeah, look, absolutely. COVID has been a very odd thing from a business perspective, because on the one hand, as you look at the dashboard in terms of how to manage the business, circulation is up, digital subscriptions are up. And at any point in time, that's a cause for celebration across the business, particularly as publishers like ourselves have seen that trend in the opposite way in recent times. However, advertising has been severely impacted, as my fellow panelists have all discussed prior. It has been severely impacted. And of course, that advertising income is hugely important to the business model. So it's a very odd time. However, I think our view that we're taking is that this is a period whereby, if we stick to our strategy and if we stick to our guns, that in the long term we'll benefit from this. So I think that's the way we look at it.
Very briefly, Colm, I'm going to just ask you, because I'm going to go to Jack in a second, but just ask you, you're saying, is the cover sales holding up?
Yeah, cover sales is holding up. Yeah. I think it's an interesting phenomenon, Stuart. And this is one of the things that we've been thinking about, which is people have more time to read at the moment. Yeah. Right. People are not traveling. People are at home. Yeah. There are no pubs. There are no restaurants. Although there are a number of pubs who are delivering to your door, I believe. But the ability to actually spend your leisure time in the way that you usually spend your leisure time is curtailed.
Yeah.
So newspaper circulation, certainly for the weekend papers, the industry is doing well.
Yeah, actually, Hendo was saying that last week. But if you look at the UK experience, they're looking at a kind of a minus 20%, which is just extraordinary versus the Irish context. But we were always insatiable buyers of news and we've a lot of newspapers in this country for a country the size. Jack, can I just go to you as well, because on that same digital duopoly thing, there was obviously the report during the week, and I've got to be careful here, because what Admatic does is it brings buyers and sellers together and through a piece of kit that cuts out the middlemen. But there was this problem, or this story, it was quite a big story, 49% margin in particularly in programmatic or in digital advertising. So maybe just explain the background to it first.
Basically, it was a report published by the ISBA in the UK. The ISBA represents advertisers in the UK, and it was a study based on the ad spend of a number of leading brands across a number of premium publisher websites, right? So while it was quite narrow, but I mean, it spoke volumes about the state of the industry. So basically, at the end of the day, it was the survey concluded that as much as 49% of an advertiser's budget was being spent on a variety of middlemen charges, including like agencies, platforms, and not quite hilarious, but I mean, there was 15%. PwC found that 15% they couldn't explain where 15% of the budget disappeared, and that speaks volumes about the whole state of the Adtech industry, which is hundreds of different companies around the world, all kind of taking a little slice along the way. And so, but for brands, I mean, the shocking thing about all of this is, for brands, they really need to, take a greater degree of ownership of the space, rather than entrusting it to the bloated ad tech industrial complex and their agencies. There needs to be transparency and accountability built into this. I mean, if I was to spend, $5,000 advertising in the Sunday Business Post, I know where my $5,000 is going. It goes straight to the Sunday Business Post, right? But if I spend $5,000 advertising online, I have no idea where it's going. Probably, that half of that will end up on the website that I actually wanted to end up on, you know. So, I mean, that is absolutely scandalous in my view. You know, and you know, I've been writing about this, you know, on and off for the last couple of years, and it's that whole, I mean, digital advertising is great if we get it right, and it's accountable, it's transparent, but the reality is it's not. Now, I know some agencies, you can't, not blaming agencies here, by the way, it's just the whole ecosystem that needs to be, you know, cleared out, or, you know, a greater degree of transparency. Now, who should do this? Well, I think advertisers themselves have a responsibility to their company, to their shareholders, to try and sort this out once and for all, because this has been going on for years now, you know, and
yes, it has.
Nobody seems to have done it. Now, I gather that this ISBA report now has been looked and poured over by every advertising association in Europe and beyond. So maybe it is time that, you know, clients and advertisers will start voting with their purse strings and say, right, until this is sorted out, you know, we're not going to spend any money with you guys.
And you see, that's the thing about going direct, because going direct does cut out those margins.
Yeah.
When I saw that report and I saw 49%, I fell off my chair, and I'll tell you why, because I know it's higher than 49%. And
Absolutely.
the problem,
but that the long tail, if you go to view that, this only explored, you know, the premium end of the market, but if you go into the long tail of the market,
correct,
and yeah, it's up to 60-70% in many cases, you know, that is scandalous, you know.
Well, it is. Well, exactly, to take your point, it means if you're spending 10 grand on Facebook, only 3 grand is appearing on the platform.
Yeah.
You know, and traditional media, but I will, because I say that's what Admatic tries to solve, so I won't necessarily get into that. But some of those platforms are actually owned by agencies, indeed, even though they might be rebadged differently. Siobhan, do you have a view on that as a media owner?
Well, I certainly do, and I mean, I think the key word is transparency. And okay, so the figure we saw in this new report of 49% of money going to black hole was, you know, news. It's not news that there's an issue with transparency in digital advertising. And that has been the case for going back years, going back to when I was writing about it in the Irish Times, you know, with blind market buys and all sorts, and brands appearing on sites that had, you know, nothing to do with their brand values and whatnot. So, you know, how many more reports does it require before some action is actually taken? Now, it suits a lot of participants in the advertising business to continue funneling all of this money onto these Googles and other platforms. But I think it's about time something changed, because it's proving extraordinarily damaging to private media owners who are producing decent, honest content, producing statistics. They may not be the multi-million statistics that agencies will get from Google and Facebook, but they're reliable and they're honest. And that, you know, that's what's required now at this point in time for the industry.
Well, I absolutely agree with you.
I would agree, you know, with what Siobhan and John have both said. And I think, you know, one of the things that's important to realize is that the companies that are going to win in the future are the companies with the strongest networks. And those networks are going to be a combination of readers, they're going to be a combination of content users, it's going to be a combination of advertisers and companies. And it's how they're connected into your brand. And, you know, change is best to come from above than below. And, you know, the important thing for the industry to realize is that change has to come from within, because otherwise the advertisers themselves will change it. And that's a place where we don't want to be.
Well, particularly, Colm, as well, when advertisers might think that they're buying the media for 5 or 10%, when in fact it's substantially more. And it's also media owners in these day and age, and whatever bit of business they want all of it. I mean, as much as they can get, and rightly so. Anyway, for another day perhaps, but I think it's a story that's going to have legs, unfortunately. Dee, the big question, just from an agency point of view, and that everybody asks, and I'm going to ask everybody, is, do you see any chink of light for a return? Is there any focus on agencies getting back and advertising getting back, and when do you think that might be?
Yeah, obviously that is the $1 million question, and you know, I'm not going to try and predict the future, but we will plan for it, and we are starting that now. So the return, or the rebound as we're calling it, is really important for our clients. And I guess while advertising might seem less important in the grand COVID scheme of things, we have proven that it can help. It can do a big public service as well as help our brands get through the crisis. So it does help. From our perspective, what we've looked at is really looking at a toolkit. And every rebound or return is going to be different for every brand. And so that's why we've created this toolkit. And the first step in that is the 100 Voices, which you mentioned earlier, Stuart. So basically 100 Voices is, as it says, we've got a panel of 100 people, but it's a remote multi-market panel. It's very important. We have lots of clients who are in multiple markets. And it utilizes design thinking to get bespoke insights, to test messaging, tone, to look at solution ideation for each of our brands. So if we're actually going to help brands to get through this crisis, we need to find some firm ground. And that firm ground is up to the minute consumer sentiment and thought, what they want and what they need at scale across our multiple markets. So that's where 100 Voices come in. We do WhatsApp groups, we do mobile surveys, we do remote interviews, we do design thinking workshops remotely, we do day in the life diaries, all done remotely. And that's what I mean in terms of a dramatic change in our strategy department since we've started. So that is a huge part of what we offer. There's lots of other tools in there, like a rebound frontier map, because as each stage happens, so if we take the Irish roadmap, there's 5 of them. That's a frontier that brands can, intervene at in a useful and authentic way. I think the big thing coming out of all of this is that companies and brands are going to have to change in terms of how they interact with consumers. It needs to be authentic, value-based and useful. Our research has shown that consumers are open to advertising if it is authentic and useful. So companies are going to have to change. What is their use? What is their value to consumers? And we've seen a lot of that. We've seen, Irish distillers offering alcohol to hand sanitizers. We've seen the insurance companies give money back, like Lay Insurance and many others. And we've seen brands struggle to find a role and a use in this. But ultimately, that's what they're going to have to do, because we have seen that there is still a need there, and it's not, I guess, so much that advertising matters. It's that the right advertising matters at this point for the new.
That's great. Thanks very much, Nick. But can you give us a date?
Well, we're aiming for Q3, so hopefully the rest of the world is coming with us. And you have to we are, John has mentioned those reports earlier. It quite a huge drop off in terms of commitment to advertising budgets. But yet there was a busy initial period, and out of that comes a lot of proactive thinking, a lot of new avenues that we haven't thought of before, and that's what we're focusing on with our clients, and we have to. And that's what we're focusing on for ourselves. What can we offer in this space? And that's why we've got the toolkit among all others. But realistically, 21, we're hoping to be, much more back on track, but we're aiming to go back to the office on August 10th, like a lot of other agencies, and really start to build up from there. And there's been benefits from working at home, as Colm has mentioned, but we miss seeing one another. And I think that creative energy will be better when we're all back together. But there's opportunities out there. You just have to go find them and make sure you are being useful as you do it, and not getting in the way.
Colm, quarter 296, is that the plan? When will we be all back, do we think?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's a tough one, and I think the reality is that it's going to be you're going to have to break this down sector by sector. I don't think there's a one size fits all, really. I think really, I would tend to agree with Dee. I think from an office perspective, in terms of many of the service providers and people like ourselves, I think we are looking at end of the summer. Certainly from the Business Buzz perspective, that's kind of how we're looking at things. I think if you're looking at some other industries, I think it's going to be a long, hard road, unfortunately. I think tourism, airlines, hospitality, I think we're going to be dealing with this well into 2021. I think there's no doubt about that. And I think then, therefore, for publishers, I think for agencies, I think for advertisers, there's going to be a two-speed approach here. I think there's going to be those who have got momentum, and there are absolutely companies who are flying through this. There is going to be a momentum there in terms of what they're able to do immediately. I think the longer-term strategies for brands who perhaps have huge equity, there's going to be a play there whereby they're going to be looking at things on a kind of an intermediate basis. And then fortunately for some, it's going to be a long, hard slog. And I think that means advertising potentially will be pushed out. You know, as one CEO said to me recently, says, I'm not flying the plane anymore. My CFO is flying the plane.
Yeah,
and that's the consideration, you know.
Just again from my chats, it just seems to be we'll be ready for Christmas. We'll take all the Christmas money. We'll do as much trading as we can, build a war chest, and come back with real advertising on the 1st of January. But Colm, just very briefly, there does seem to be a new kind of a calm out there. Would that be fair?
I think there is. I think the helter-skelter first few weeks of late March and early April have moved on. Within the Business Post, we're responsible for the advertising and sponsorship for TG Car, we're their sales house as well. And certainly, you know, we're starting to see some indications there that TV is starting to come back a little bit. And some of the brands, as I said, some of the big international brands, with strong presence in Ireland are starting to come back. So I think there is a calmness starting to come into things. I think you know, decision makers are starting to take the view that it can't just be a case of stopping everything, which was the immediate reaction. And I think it's all about confidence. I think as we start to see small parts of the economy open up, I think that is going to start to lead and breathe to confidence. Yeah. But like all things, HSE guidelines are going to be massively important in terms of social distancing, in terms of how workplaces are going to have to work, in terms of how events, you know, trade shows, and how do people do business. And the one thing that I think is going to be massively important is going to be the ability to do new business. Right now, we're doing a lot of business with the people we do a lot of business with.
Okay.
The ability to do new business is going to be the most intriguing fact.
Jack, quite briefly, we're flying through it now. Can you give us a view?
Yeah, well, I've been, as I said from earlier on, talking to both clients and agencies over the last couple of weeks. I'm kind of heartened by the fact that they're at least talking about going back into the market. As to when that will be is a slightly different story, but certainly once restrictions are lifted, there will be a gradual, and as Colm said, you know, sector by sector, it'll be different for different sectors. So it's going to, you know, I think probably, you know, certainly Q3 as Dee mentioned. And I think you're probably going to see a lot more kind of strategic, short-term stuff as well happening, you know, which is not necessarily a great thing. But I think the market will take it. So, you know, any long-term brand building, I think we can forget about that for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And the way forward will be short-term, isn't it, for forevermore, I think.
Yeah, and indeed more direct to consumer, which is kind of in a roundabout way the middleman conversation we were having earlier, but I think there's going to see more of that. Siobhan, have you a view? Although I think you're muted there, are you? You're muted. You need to switch your microphone back on. I'll just keep talking for you for the minute. Yes, there you are.
Good man, no better man.
I could lip read. You were saying Q3 2022, I think.
And then I said, and the winning lotto numbers for this Wednesday are, I don't know, Stuart.
Okay.
I just don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it, as has always been the case, the advertising market is driven by consumer sentiment. And consumer sentiment is going to be driven by government action. Now, you know, I would say the private sector is 75% of the economy. We've played our part. We've played a huge part, being told, doing what we've been asked to do, you know, what we've endured in the last 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks. I personally think it's over to government now to say, okay, you know, forget about getting debt, you know, forget about kind of balancing our books this year. We have to start looking at socializing the debt. They've got to take massive moves to get this economy back moving, get it motoring, get people back to feeling positive, and then hopefully things will begin to look after themselves from there. But a lot of it is down to, as I said, sentiment, and that's driven by government and what they do.
Yeah, I do think the government cash situation, and again, I was talking to Colm about this separately, the cash situation is actually not a handout. What it is, in effect, is a stimulus to try and build up demand, because there's no point everybody going back to work and everybody being open with nobody any money to spend. There are an awful lot of people out there really, really suffering, and suffering financially and suffering emotionally and everything else. So there's no point. You need to build up the demand. So that government money, Siobhan, surely it's an investment, isn't it? It's not just
it is. And bear in mind, you know, for all that companies have actually got, as I said at the start, in actual giveaway money, in actual free money, is a 3 months waiver on the commercial rates if their premises have shut down.
Yeah.
The rest of it is loan finance, which will have to be paid back. So there's a lot more to do, I would suggest.
And also that finance is not getting into the hands of SMEs. As I
No.
talked last week, 17 million is only drawdown. That's 1.7 out of 2 billion quid, without repeating myself. But because of the constraints that are being put on it, Colm, in terms of banks loaning it, in terms of all of that stuff, it's actually making it difficult to get your hands on it. It's not a grant. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, I think you have to have a bit of balance, and I think the reality is that this is an incredibly difficult situation for the government, and if I'm fair, I think they've done a good job overall. You know, certainly when this started, and the business post offices are above the Tesco there in Marion Road, and on the first night this happened, I went down to find that I couldn't even get a coffee because of the queues at the tills for people getting food. There was one woman who bought 48 cans of beans. I wonder how she's doing. But you know, we have gone from that to a situation whereby there's relative calm, and I think the government, and particularly the role that the HSE and Dr. Tony Holohan has played has been really important. That said, right, yes, a massive stimulus, the likes of which this country has never seen, is going to be what's required, and debt financing, while it'll be a tool for some, for the vast majority of others it isn't. You know, and it's worth looking back to the last banking crisis. You go back to 2007 and the national debt was about 45 to 50 billion euros. By the time we got to just before the election, it was at 200 billion, having peaked at 250 at about 2015. So people think about the bailout and the troika, and they've got a number of 80 billion in their head. It's way off. It's about closer to 200 billion as what it cost us, because for 10 years the country ran a deficit. So when you put that in context of where we are right now, and the bill for this COVID, coming out of COVID, is probably somewhere immediately probably north of 50 billion. We're looking at having a national debt of 500 billion, probably in the next 5 years. Now, for a country of 5 million people, the numbers just don't stack. So we're going to have to find a new way, and it's not something we're going to have to find alone. This is going to have the power of the ECB behind it. And in many ways, it's going to have to, at a global level, we're going to have to make sure that where the euro sits versus the dollar is going to be hugely important. And some experts are saying the euro could be the ultimate sacrifice out of this whole program. Yeah. So it's going to require unparalleled levels of support and real imagination to ensure that we get this right.
And also the fact that the bond markets are starting to show a bit of a wobble, it might be difficult to get our hands on that cash in the first place. Yep. And the second thing, I know Conor O'Kelly is doing a great job to try and get that money in. He already got the 156 billion in, but getting the rest of it, lenders aren't lending money. You know, cash is king. And the second part of it is, Colm, is austerity is not going to be the answer. When this is all over, austerity can't be the answer. So that money's got to come back in some other way, you know.
Absolutely.
Dee, do you have a view?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as everybody said, I think as a country, we have done relatively well in terms of how we've managed this. It's been very difficult on the public and what they've had to endure, but the current government or caretaker government, you know, has done a good job, and they've given a roadmap which has different phases. It is up to the business community to really adapt to those and to get out as soon as you can to drive that demand. I think there is opportunities there, but as Siobhan said, we can't take the whole brunt. There has to be a lot more in terms of small business, and really focusing on Irish business versus maybe some of the larger multinationals that are here, which would have been the focus previously. So there's opportunities there, but it is going to need a lot more support to get us back running. But then there is an onus on business owners to make sure that you're in a very efficient business model yourself, and that you are doing what's necessary to keep your business afloat and fighting fit for the recovery.
Yeah, easier said than done sometimes, though, I'm afraid, Dee, regrettably. I actually will share the poll, because if I can, well, I can tell you what it says, and you have to trust me in that. I'll end it first of all, and I would share the results now. So, funny enough, 101% of people thought it was good or interesting or really, really useful. I think that's probably a Zoom update, but nobody said it wasn't from me, so I'm very grateful to you. Okay, that's it. It's nearly 2 p.m. That's a wrap. We'll see you next week. Mags Nelson, the great Pat Kiley. You can register on Eventbrite, and in fact, I will send the attendees today an early bird situation. Thanks very much to Siobhan O'Connell. Thanks very much to Deirdre Waldron, Dee Waldron. Thanks to John McGee and John McGee. In fact, next week, Colm, we'll all come in as John McGee.
I think it's a great idea. I've started something.
Yeah, hero worship. Well, thanks very much, Colm O'Reilly, CEO of Business Post. Thanks, as always, to John McGee as well of IMJ Adworld. And if you are in advertising, it's free. subscribe to Adworld. It does go out on a Friday, and I think even Dee will probably agree with me. It is the most sought out piece of email that goes out in the advertising world. So thank you all very much, and thanks very much for people who came on and were watching. Some people apparently, there was a Zoom update going on during this, so that's Zoom. They're trying to put in place new security features, but with the consequence of that means that users also have to update their Zoom, and a lot of users are not subscribing to Zoom. So one wonders, is it actually a way to tempt people to subscribe? But anyway, we'll all stay inside now or go outside our houses and clap for the advertising frontline workers as we say goodbye. Very grateful to you all. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you.